Good people, it is growth group week. That means we're continuing on in our story of 1st and 2nd Samuel. Believe it or not, I believe that this is week 19 this year of growth groups in these two beautiful chapters and in these two beautiful books. And I hope you're learning a lot. I hope that you are being formed unto Christ. That's ultimately the goal, not just to learn, but to be formed, not just information, but formation and transformation into becoming more like Jesus. This is the avenue that happens is with one another and with God's word. And of course, hopefully you are communing with the one true God. Look, I've said this before a million times. I'll say it again. These videos are really bad substitutes for your own time with Jesus. So don't use these videos as a shortcut. Use these as a supplement. And I hope that you're doing that in that order. It does matter. It matters that you are meeting with God one-on-one, just as I have, and just as I've asked God to meet with me through his word and by his spirit. I pray he does the same for you as well. All right, let's get down to these two chapters in 18 and 19. Ultimately, I'm going to do a couple things a little bit different. We'll summarize the text, but then I want to ask the three questions kind of in a different order because I think this is one big story in 18 and 19 that I think we can answer together. So let's just kind of understand what's happening in 2 Samuel 18 and 19. Ultimately, civil war breaks out, and Absalom and David and his men go to war with one another, and Absalom gets caught in this great oak tree. A lot of people think that it's his hair that gets caught in the oak, and the mule keeps walking away. There's a servant that comes and tells Joab. Joab's like, if you lost your mind, you should have killed him. So he rushes over, kills Absalom, even though David very clearly said, in the sight of all the people and in the sight of the three generals that he put in charge, be kind to Absalom. In other words, don't kill him. Bring him back alive. And Joab has the opportunity to bring him back alive and goes and rushes towards him, throws 3 javelins in his heart, and then his armor bearers finish him off. And you see all the chaos that comes as a result of that. But Absalom is killed by Joab in a civil war with Israel and David's men. And upon hearing the news, these two servants go and they tell David what has gone on. Upon hearing the news, David weeps greatly over the loss of his son. Because after all, although Absalom is a rebel, he is the king's rebel. And he is the king's son. That will come into play with some things that we'll have to say here in a little bit. But that's really chapter 18. Absalom is killed. I just love, you can hear David's heartbreak over the recollection of what he says when it says this in 2 Samuel 18, verse 33. And as he went, he said, "Oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom, would I had died instead of you, oh Absalom, my son, my son." What a great picture of what it means to grieve. I don't know that we know how to grieve all that well these days. We just kind of bury it and move on. But also, what a beautiful picture of God's heart for us. That even though we're rebels, and even though we wander and we want to set up our own kingdom instead of Jesus' kingdom, oh, that he would have died instead of us. What a great picture of God's heart for his people. And that's not even getting to the point of like what is revealed about God, but I think that's part of it. All right, so that's chapter 18. 19, it goes on, right? All of a sudden, David is still grieving, and Joab he's a weird character, man, right here. He goes to David and basically demands that he quit grieving and that his grief is just a sign not only of his grief for his son, but of hatred for him and for all of his warriors. And you're going to lose your whole kingdom here. It's been given back to you, and you're going to lose your whole kingdom here if you don't kind of grieve appropriately. Do what we want you to do, as Joab would kind of say here. So Joab rebukes David for not caring about the people that actually won the war instead of Absalom, who of course was in rebellion against him. He accuses him of loving his enemies over loving the people that have been loyal to him. Oof. If that is not in our own blood, I don't know what is. You've been nicer to them than you've been nice to me, and I haven't done anything wrong. And look at how you're loving these people that have been so terrible to you. That's in all of us. We think this is like the heart of the older brother and the prodigal son. That, how dare you love the rebel son, the younger son, and you haven't loved me this way. That's in all of us. We think we have earned God's mercy. We think we have earned God's relationship. We think we have earned God's favor. And in fact, we haven't. We're all rebels and wanderers. Again, I'm getting ahead of myself, but I can't help it. Really good stuff in this chapter. So David returns to Jerusalem with the escort of all of Judah, but not before pardoning in chapter 19, pardoning two of his enemies. Shimei, you'll remember back in, I believe it's chapter 16, he was cursing David. He was throwing rocks at David. And, they want to kill David. They want to kill Shimei. And they're like, hey, this guy can't be cursing you like this. And David goes, this might be from the Lord. Let's just listen. It might be from him. And he lets him live then. And now he comes back about to cross back over into the Jordan into Israel to take his throne back. And he forgives his enemy, the one who would curse him, he forgives. And then Mephibosheth, who Ziba had reported earlier, that he wants his own kingdom back regarding Saul. Now Mephibosheth comes and says, actually, it didn't work like that. That's not actually how it happened. Somebody's lying. And David, instead of figuring all that out, gives the king half of what he had given to Mephibosheth before, and then given to Ziba, he gives half of it back to Ziba, Mephibosheth's servant, and also half to Mephibosheth. He could have dealt harshly with all of these folks, but he instead returns humbly, and he returns with pardon and forgiveness at the forefront of what he's about to go do. Really interesting that this is the return of the king, and it is again showing us what kind of king we ultimately serve, not in David, but in the Son of David, the Son of God, Jesus of Nazareth. So in chapter 19, it ends with this fight between Israel and Judah on who owns more of David, which is really revealing of our own heart. We want to own the king. We don't want to be owned by him. And on we go. All right. I've gotten way ahead of myself, but I can't help it. There's just too much to say. So let me just ask, what is this? Not necessarily, I don't want to ask what it reveals about God first. I want to reveal about us. I want to ask that question first. What does it reveal about humanity? And then in the midst of it, in the midst of these two chapters, again, that kind of form one story, what does this, I think, reveal about God, or at least throw a shadow for us to be able to see, man, God is standing here. It may not be explicit, but we can infer some things in the shadows, so to speak. So chapter 18, we are quick to do in our time what God will do in his time. God was clearly going to hand over the kingdom back over to David through all of this, but Joab gets impatient, and instead of allowing David to deal with Absalom in a way that would have been probably patient and merciful, we don't usually prefer that. We want our enemies to die immediately. We don't want them to be forgiven. This is the heart of Jonah. The heart of Jonah being like, I don't want to go to Nineveh because I know, God, you're going to forgive them. If I preach the gospel to them, you are merciful and you're gracious and you're going to forgive my enemies, and I prefer them not be forgiven, and therefore I won't go to Nineveh. That's in all of us. That's in the heart of Joab. That's in all of us. It reveals to us the heart of Jonah, the heart of, I want my enemies to pay. And Joab wanted his enemies to pay, and that's why he killed Absalom. In addition to all of this, there are loyalties which are good and right when it comes to our loves. It's good and right to love our family first and more than others that we lead and others that we might be in association with. And Joab wanted David to love the people that he led more than his own son. And again, it turns into really self-righteous rebuke and nonsense. Joab wanted David to appreciate all that he had done for David, including killing including killing the king's son. But David was not having it, right? He ends up removing Joab from being the commander of his army and instead puts Absalom's commander of the army in place of Joab right there in chapter 19. His name is Amasa. That was Absalom's commander of the army. And David instills him as king. Kind of fascinating that all that lays back on Joab's lap in a form of a judgment, although we'll find that it will be temporary. I think in all of this, what I see about God, as much as it reveals about us, I think it also reveals something about God. It shows us the kind of God that we serve. If David represents God on the earth, and I think he does during that time, and points us then to the true and better David, who is Jesus, then our God too loves us, even though we rebel, even though we are wanderers, even though we are rebels at heart, even though we have the heart of Absalom. We think we can do it better than our dad. God still loves us even more, even when it might mean our death. He grieves when we sin. He grieves when that sin leads to our own separation from him. And I've already said this, but he has a heart that says, man, I would have rather died than to have lost you. And that's indeed what he has done. He has died rather than lose us, and instead brings us back into the fold through his son Jesus. What a beautiful picture. I think chapter 19, what did it reveal about us and God? Well, first, about us, there will always be people that think you should love and lead differently than you do. They think that you should do some things that ultimately you're not called to do, not in that order, anyways. And there will always be people that do that. Joab was that way. He wanted David to love him and his kingdom more than he loved his son, and ended up rebuking him. And again, David brings that judgment back on him and says, "I'm going to remove you from commander." Joab demands David to do things his way, to lead the like he wants him to lead. He uses his preference and his desires, and he elevates that over what God wants for the kingdom, especially as he returns back to Israel. Right? We can say that we own a king. This is, again, another thing that is in our hearts. We think we own a king. Like you see Israel and Judah fighting over who has more stake in David at the end of chapter 19. Israel thinking that there's 10 tribes here, and so we own 10 parts out of 12 of the tribes, and Judah, you only own really one part, or Judah and another tribe there. You only own maybe one or two parts, and so we have more stake here, and it's nonsense. No one has any stake in the ownership of how the king should rule or if he should return. That is all upon God's sovereign plan, and as we know, it is unfolding in real time. But we do this. We think we own leaders. We think we own a portion of how they should do things, and they should answer to us ultimately. We get disappointed when they don't answer to us, or they don't do things the way we want. That's what it reveals about us. I think also what it reveals about God in all of this. Again, David, if he's representing King Jesus on the earth, and he is but a shadow of the substance of Jesus. He points to the true and better David, who is Jesus. Again, David pardons those who don't deserve it, in Shimei and in Mephibosheth and in others on the way back in, and he blesses those who have blessed him. You know this, as he exited out of Jerusalem just one chapter earlier in chapter 17, there were those that came and blessed him and gave him all the things that they would need to wage war and to rest. And we come to find out, we find one of those guys, Barzillai. David not only pardons his enemies, but he blesses his friends immensely. He says, "You come back with me, I'll build you up." And he's like, "Well, I'm old, I'm not going to come back with you, but here's my servant." Some people might think that he's his son. I don't know about that. But Chimham is his servant. He brings Chimham back as a representative of Barzillai, who he had blessed while he was destitute. And of course, David blesses him immensely. It is a beautiful picture of the kind of loving relationship that God wants and has with us and his people. We deserve repayment for our sin. We deserve repayment for cursing God ultimately in our previous life before Jesus, but instead he brings us close and he blesses us. What a beautiful picture. All right, what must I do as a result? Just two things that in no particular order. One, who is God calling you to forgive? God forgives Shimei, pardons him, and he forgives Mephibosheth, obviously. Eventually, he'll reinstate Joab back into being the commander of the army. That's in chapters to come after Amasa doesn't turn out to be a great leader. But who are you called to forgive right now? Who is God calling you to move towards, like Shimei and Mephibosheth and others, to extend the kind of grace that God has extended to you? David obviously loved Absalom for who he was and not what he did. Are you framing someone else by their behavior towards you instead of who they are? They are a chosen, blood-bought son and daughter of God, just like you are, just like Absalom was. Who are you being called to forgive? David also forgave Shimei and Mephibosheth. How is God calling you to engage those who have hurt you, to forgive them and perhaps be reconciled? That's one question. Really difficult. Won't skate past that. Very difficult. And then secondly, are you getting entitled for your long-held service to the king? I am. I have. There are seasons where I have to fight this off, where I go, I've been doing this for a long time, Lord. Can't this also work out? Can't you also do things how I want you to do them? In my time and according to my plan, and if you could just bless me abundantly, it'd be great along the way. After all, don't you see all the things that I've done for you? It's entitlement. It's what Joab probably had in his heart. Like, I've done all these things for you, and you would bless him instead of us? Come on. That's the same thing that we do with God. So this is the heart of Joab's rebuke for David, right? And David grieved his son's death, and Joab's ultimately got removed as commander. So are you growing entitled with God as you walk with him, or are you growing in gratitude? That's a fight, y'all. As you grow and you walk with him longer and longer, and that is a fight. Will I become more entitled and therefore embittered, or will I grow in my gratitude with the King? Pray these questions are provoking for you, and that your time in your growth groups are formational and transformational unto Christ. Love y'all. See you soon.